Okay, we are recording, so we can go ahead and get
Great.
started.
Kirsten, can you call the roll, please?
I sure can.
Wonderful,
Smith?
thank you. Here.
Alicia,
Here.
Tyler, no Tyler,
He's
Nope.
not coming.
He's not coming, so you won't get him.
Natalie,
Here.
Trevor,
Here.
Zach,
I'm here.
Paul Whitmore.
Here.
Megan said she wasn't coming, right? Amber,
I didn't hear from Amber, but she's not here.
okay. Kia,
Here.
Cece,
Here.
Youngbrook,
She's not gonna come.
okay. Did I miss anybody? Okay, sounds like that's it.
Fantastic. Welcome everyone to the June board meeting of the Invent Learning Hub. It's I'm very thankful that you're here to be a part of this. It seems that all of our meetings are getting well, they're all important, but some become a little more intense than others. This may be one of the intense ones. We've got some things to go over and some changes to talk about and that sort of thing. So anyway, the main thing is welcome. We kind of messed around with Alicia's mission moment. I'm not sure what she's going to do in lieu of that. So Alicia, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I really just wanted to take a moment to talk about what's been going on in our city and our country. I know I've had a heavy heart. I've been interacting, honestly, mainly with people through social media, just kind of recommitting to having tough conversations with people and doing that in a respectful way, but also not backing down with some changes I feel like need to be made in our country. I think it's been a little tough to watch the situation and see kind of a lot of lack of leadership in different ways in our country as well. But also hopeful in seeing some past leaders, I think, who've reached out and tried to do some good things to try to direct people and lead. So I know Gabe and I have been talking a lot at school about this and how we wanted to handle these things in our school. How can our school be proactive? You know, I think sometimes when it comes to like tough issues going on in the community, they tend to get separated a little bit from work. But I think these issues greatly impact our students and families. And I definitely want our families to know where we stand on this as a school and what we're doing as well. So I was just going to share with you today some of our thoughts and some of the things that we've been doing. First of all, we have been calling all of our families and just checking in with them and saying, hey, you know, we know there's a lot going on in the city. We know, you know, hearts are heavy. There's a lot of emotions going on. How are you? We care. We want to check in with you. And so those phone calls have been going really well. I think our families have really appreciated that we've been reaching out to them. Secondly, more on a personal note, like I said, has just been myself kind of recommitting to having tough conversations. I think that's something that I need to be doing as an educational leader in the city. Also as a leader who serves primarily Black and Brown students and making sure that our families know where our school stands on these issues. And then also just engaging with other educators. There are actually two other educators and myself. We've been kind of working to create a new Facebook page to kind of start promoting some things and just starting more conversations. We have other ideas about some video clips that we may be making. And I mean, there are bigger ideas, but right now it is starting foundationally as a Facebook page. There have also been, there's an educator from Tinley who reached out to other educators today that there will probably be a day in August where all schools are kind of uniting on this issue. And I don't know exactly what all that looks like yet or what it's called, but it's more of indie educators, indie schools kind of taking a stance together. So he's leading that. And I reached out to him today and said, please include us. We also talked today about putting together a team to discuss more intentionally infusing lessons and discussions around bias with our students during our SEL time. So, I wouldn't say this is something we've not been doing with our students. We do it. I don't know that we do it intentionally or that it's planned out as far as exactly the way we want to do it. So those conversations will be taking place this summer so that we have more of a plan in place. At the staff level this year, when we do our community circles each week, every one of our staff members, we do badge work, and every one of our staff members had to do a badge that was on privilege. And it goes through the different types of privilege a person has. And you actually create a necklace, and then there's some reading that goes along with it. And then you kind of write your own experiences with privilege and unprivilege. And all of our staff members took time this year to share that out within the staff circle. And so that was pretty powerful. We've already been doing some work. We would like to do more next year. We were thinking more around the lines of book studies. There was a list that just came out from a group of educators that really had a 3-tier levels of books, more of I'm just kind of becoming aware of my bias versus kind of moving into the next level of digging deeper into that. And then I think the third level was more around activism. So maybe allowing our staff members to group up and decide what books they want to read and do something like that. So that's something we've been talking about. And lastly, I just wanted to push out to our board. We're going to talk later in the meeting about a board retreat potentially, and what we want to do as a board, how we want to tackle this together. I definitely kind of had written down the idea that the privilege badge may be a really great activity to do as a board, and share some experiences and be able to talk about those things together. But I'm definitely open to, us all digging into that and thinking about what could be good. So I just wanted to challenge our board to also find ways that we can infuse that into potentially our board retreat or moving forward. So I wanted to share that with you all. If anybody would like to react, question, share, give ideas, we can pause and do that.
Hey, Alicia, it's Paul. Last year, every year we do a month of awareness, and last year was around inclusion. A lot of our staff members were encouraged to take the Harvard implicit bias test, which was a really good eye-opening experience for all of us. So if you've not used that tool in the bias training, maybe with staff, that's one good resource I think that is available and valuable.
Thank you.
Alicia, I just wanted to thank you. You have been very vocal with friends and just where the school stands. And so I definitely appreciate that. This last couple of weeks have been hell, to say the least. I have 3 sons and married. And so there's a total of 5 Black men in my home. And it really hit home this last week with our 17-year-old finally starting to ask some questions. I don't know if it's right or wrong. We've tried to shield as best as we can. He has the rest of his life to be a Black man and live that experience, and trying to kind of, shield as best as we can. But he had some questions, and it was really difficult having that conversation. So I just wanted to thank you for taking those stands that you have been. And I'd like to hear the direction that you are going with the students and staff. I think is really important.
I appreciate you sharing that, Kia, and just resounding yes, and whatever, I can do as an individual or just as a full board I'm all available and ready to work.
Alicia, Zach here. Love all the social media graphics that are going out. You've been very active around Black Lives Matter on social media, I've noticed. And I think that's really great. Kind of building off Paul's implicit bias training. Child Advocates has done a really wonderful, it's a very intensive training. It's a 2 full day training. But it's called Interrupting Racism. I had the privilege of doing that when I was over at Damien Center, and it was really great to do that. I'm sure they're going to be slammed with requests for that training. I don't know if I think they've kind of suspended it with COVID, but I assume when they're up and running, there are going to be a lot of people who are interested in that training, but I do highly recommend it. I think it's something that all of your staff would really benefit from, as well as the board. So that might be a resource to look into. And they might have some, since they've suspended the training, they might have some suggested reading materials, that kind of thing. I'm blanking on her last name. Her name is Jill, but I'm blanking on her last name. Over at Child Advocates runs those trainings. So Pierce, I want to say it's, no, that's not wrong. That's wrong. That's a different Jill, but I know it's Jill something over at Child Advocates.
Thank you.
Alicia, I would also encourage to allow students and family to drive what that change is going to look like with the school. I think that's really important for them to make sure that they are centered in this and that it's not just us board and adults kind of making decisions. They might want to talk about things that we haven't thought about. And making space for that healing process right now when they do come back, because it's a collective trauma that's happening right now across the country. And they're gonna have to be able to process that. And they're young, this is a lot of heavy stuff for these babies to have to process and deal with. And so just making sure that as a school, we're keeping space for that healing and also making sure that they're centered in whatever actions are moving forward.
Thank you.
Great discussion. Thank you very much. Alicia, you want to move on to the executive report?
Yes, and I'm going to let Gabe start us out on that.
Hi, Gabe.
Hi, team. Alicia, should I share my screen with this, or does everybody have that file? I mean, I don't know if
they do have it, but I think that visual would be good to go ahead and share.
Okay, let me. Every time I'm on Zoom, I complain about Zoom. But let me get this pulled up. Share screen. All right, can everybody see that data?
Not yet.
Oh, I can't share my screen. It says you disabled my ability.
Well, how about I will share it for you. How about that? Is that easier?
Yeah. So as Alicia's pulling that up, I will just everybody see that data.
Not yet.
Oh, I can't share my screen. It says you disabled my ability.
Well, how about
Are you hearing that twice, like I am?
I will share it for you. Sorry about that. I think our Facebook or our yes, one of my other tabs got clicked. Sorry about that.
All right, so as Alicia's pulling that up, there we go. Just a reminder, not that you need one, that the end of our school year did not quite go as planned. And, with us being in e-learning, this whole COVID, obviously, this whole COVID pandemic that happened is another example of how our Black and Brown community is impacted more heavily, I feel like, when anything like this happens. That's true both health-wise and the impact that it has had on those families, and economically for sure, but also when it comes to education. This, I think you're going to see this data kind of shows that that our students and this e-learning had a bigger impact on them than I'm sure it did on students across the rest of the state that maybe are outside this urban bubble. So our end of year data. So our goal for end of year reading was 80% of our students will reach 1 year of reading growth. That was designed to be measured on 2 assessments, one being text reading comprehension, where they read us a book and then we ask them questions and they answer it. Then the second piece was an Achieve 3000 test. It's an online assessment that our 3 through 5 would take. Well, through e-learning, we decided that we were strictly going to use our text reading comprehension assessment. And this kudos goes out to all of our teachers and all of our staff. Alicia was also making calls, but we tested all but I think 5 students in our school via Google Hangouts and Zoom. So we spent 2 weeks calling and setting up meetings, even students who hadn't done anything on e-learning. We went to their houses, we called them, we texted them. Our teachers were resilient and persistent in that, and made sure that we got every single student that we possibly could. So that's a huge testament to leadership from Alicia, really pushing our teachers to do that, but also our teachers' desire to really do what's right for kids. So if you look at our growth, and I started big and then I kind of broke it down as we went. We were at 54%, which is gut wrenching, honestly. We break that down into kindergarten through 2nd grade and 3rd through 5th. Kindergarten through 2nd was at 33.3%. With our 3rd through 5th graders, 70% of those students showed 1 year of reading growth. I won't read all the statistics for the other grade levels, but you can see them there. It's very clear that our kindergarten, 1st and 2nd graders did not meet that 1 year goal at the same clip as our 3rd through 5th graders. And there's a really important point for us to make, and that's in that red writing underneath that big first big rectangle. At our middle of year, which I shared this data with you guys at a board meeting, or you all at a board meeting in January, I believe, 76% of our K2 students were on track to reach 1 year of reading growth. At that point, midway through the year, 76% of our students were on track. We ended with 33.3% in K2. That shows the impact that e-learning had on especially our youngest kids. At middle of year, our, sorry, I had it pulled up, our 3 through 5, they were at 51% on track to show 1 year of growth. So those numbers, I mean, almost literally flipped. So our K2 students did not meet the goal, obviously, at the same rate that 3 through 5 did, but that was the opposite at middle of the year. So if Alicia, you want to scroll down just a little bit so we can show that second set. This is why. The data that you're seeing on the second slide is why. For those of you who know anything about reading instruction, there's 5 basic components, but our K2 students, 3 of those components, phonics, letter knowledge, and phonemic awareness, are 3 of the most important pieces to learning how to read. That is very hard to do over a e-learning lesson. You've got to listen to students read. You've got to show them how your mouth makes sounds. You've got to show them the letters, listen to them say the sounds, blend those sounds together. There's a lot that goes into teaching a child to read, and I'm sorry, it just can't be done over the phone. It can't be done over a video. It can't be done on a recorded lesson. It's hard. So we went back, we were lucky enough to have done a progress monitoring meeting. We tested all these students on the same assessment right before we left. Not because we were leaving, but it was just that time of the year for us to do that. From that moment until, which was end of February, from that moment till end of year, we had 67% of our kindergarten through second graders showed no reading growth. They either went down or stayed exactly the same as their February reading letter, essentially, what they scored on in their February assessment. So as a school, we were at 51.6, showed no growth during e-learning. For 3 through 5, it was 38%. And if you think about that logically, those students already know how to read. All they're doing is practicing, right? If you know how to play, you already know how to dribble and pass and shoot. If you can practice on your own, and you're going to get better at basketball. But if you pick up a basketball for the first time and you're just trying to watch YouTube videos, you're going to struggle, right? It's going to be hard. And that's what happened to our kiddos. A lot of our K2 students, and as you saw at the beginning of your data, with the students that came to us, we're already so far behind, and we're victims of a system that is set up to basically fail them, at schools that were failing them, and we took them on and said this is going to be different. And then unfortunately, this crisis, this pandemic, really put a damper on that progress that we were making. So. Yeah, you can go through there. 75% of our kindergartners did not grow a reading level during the COVID crisis. So with all of that being said, and I'll take a couple questions after this, but Alicia and I have been diligently planning, researching, grant writing, anything that we can to prepare our students and our teachers to make up and fill those gaps for next year. We're developing intensive plans that really are going to address those kindergartners, because that's our first group of kiddos that we're going to be able to say they were with us K to 8. What impact did we have on these kids over 9 years? How successful is ILH? And unfortunately, at the end of this year, a lot of those students just really struggle. So, this was, we were making the gains, and obviously at 76%, that's not good enough either. But we were in the right direction, and e-learning just is not something that is conducive to true learning. So we are, like I said, we're working diligently to put those plans in place so that we can address those gaps, we can fill those gaps, and we can close that gap that COVID has left with us. But also that our students deserve, it's going to be a new challenge next year with all of the other changes that may be taking place. But our teachers are up for it. I'm up for it. I know Alicia's up for it. So we're going to put those plans in place and make sure that these gaps get closed. But I will gladly answer any questions you have or just thoughts you have after looking at the data.
I'm curious if things have to go into e-learning in the fall. Do you guys have some preliminary ideas how to help particularly the younger students in this area?
Yes. So obviously these are very early plans and just thoughts that have kind of been bouncing around for full e-learning. But, I do believe that our ability to utilize some of our resources like Miss Mia, Miss Clem, some of our assistants, having them focus their role more on those K2 kiddos to be able to get one-on-one meetings weekly with them is going to be if only e-learning is taking place, that, and myself and Alicia and Penny and Rachel and everybody that doesn't have an actual classroom, getting us in front of those kiddos 2 or 3 times a week live, listening to them read, helping them, looking at the same documents they're looking at. It's time consuming, it's difficult, but I do think utilizing our resources kind of in that manner would help bridge some of those gaps a little bit. But that's a really good question. Yeah, I will say I have not heard or I really talked to any other schools about how their data looked at the end of the year. I mean, I don't know if most schools even did any sort of assessing the way that we did at the end of the school year. In this way, I do know that based on what we were doing with e-learning, and I had a teacher tell me this just yesterday during one of our check-ins. She said we were teachers hang out with teachers. She said that we were doing so much more than any of my teacher friends were doing, and so that is awesome. But that's also heartbreaking that you look around the city of Indianapolis. If this was our data and we were busting our tails to get this, those schools and school districts and charter schools even possibly who weren't doing similar work, it's just another gap and another cause for inequity that our students in Indianapolis are going to be facing.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend who works in the IPS school district on Sunday, and he said they had 73% or something like that were just completely unengaged in the e-learning process for a multitude of reasons. But he said that it was just a huge struggle to get students engaged to do anything like this. So I applaud you guys for being so proactive in what you've done.
Yeah, I will say, Miss Mia, Josh, we have a couple bulldogs on the staff that are going to hunt you down if you do not respond to them. Yeah, we did our very best not to let anybody check out. Yeah.
And I had a similar question, but first want to applaud all of you for your diligence and commitment to the students. I know the gaps are significant and there's no question about that. With those that were able to see growth or those that weren't able to, do we have some insights? Not looking for answers today, but for those that did see growth, like what was that situation? What were the factors that produced that? And then similar, the converse for those that haven't, are there any just, topics that are bubbling up that you can address more holistically? Just some things to consider more than a question, I guess.
Yeah, so I kind of just recently, actually once all this data started to come together, have been preliminarily looking at attendance rates during e-learning to see how those affect what kids grew. I will tell you, obviously it's clear that our 3rd through 5th grade students, they grew, just because of the situations that they're in and their ability just to how reading works. But, in our K2 levels, the students that grew were the students who were pretty much already on track or above. They were students who don't need that teacher there with them saying, hey, try that word again, or hey, read this sentence again, or hey, get up, we got to do this. Those students who are self-motivators and who already have a lot of the skills and talent that they need to be successful, just period, as a student, right? And that's all anecdotal. I have no data to back that up other than looking at a kid's name and saying, yeah, I know that student. When you only have 100 kids in a building, it's easy to know everyone. So yeah, I think that was a big piece of it. I have not managed to decipher the engagement data and determine if that was a true correlation between their growth and their engagement, but I am working on it. Yep. Good question.
Yeah, again, I commend you for just the level of detail to all of this and appreciate everything that you're doing.
I'm going to go ahead and move over to some data that we're going to share. Some of this data was already shared, so I won't go over the pieces we've already talked about. But when we last went over these data points, we didn't have it all complete. So I'm going to go back to this. Once again, we're still going to see a lot of things that were impacted by e-learning, unfortunately. Okay, so our first charter goal was that 80% of students attending ILH for a minimum of 162 days will make one full year of growth in reading according to Dibble's guided reading, Achieve 3000. So that's what we already went over. We do not intend to ask that that goal be changed. It is a feasible goal that we should expect that we're reaching that goal. Sadly, I really do think we would have met that goal had we not moved into e-learning. You'll notice I've placed it in red just essentially because we did not meet that goal. The second charter goal was that 95% of students in grade 3 and up will have an updated pathways plan by the end of the year. This, once again, was a goal that I don't think we ever should have missed had we not been on e-learning. This was a goal that, you know, when kids are in the school, I can guarantee that 100% of them would have finished their pathways plan. We wouldn't have had a reason for them not to, unless for some reason they just were not attending school. I know that Gabe and Rachel made phone calls, texted families, and really kind of bugged everyone to please complete this. It was just an online form that the students had to complete, and it was a part of the pathways lessons that they were doing during e-learning, but we ended with 68% of our students completing those. I did want to suggest what you see over in the blue will be suggested changes that we want to take to OEI. And I just wanted to bring this to the board to get your blessing. But I would like to amend this because I'm of not knowing next year if we'll be in school or if we'll be back to e-learning. I was going to suggest that we leave the 95% if we're in school and that we change to 70% if we move to e-learning. So I'll go ahead and go on through these and then we can stop and come back to questions or comments. The next goal was that 80% of parents will have family participation in at least 50% of the design thinking exhibitions. Honestly, this year, finding that a lot of our families didn't have transportation. And I think you've already seen this data point, but we had 46% of our families that did attend 50% or more of the events. So what we were going to suggest that we change this goal to would be that the numbers stay 80% of our students who have attended 162 days, but that the goal would just be that they would attend an event instead of it being that they attend 50% of the events. Still, we're going to have a ways to push. 80% still a lofty goal, but I think it's more reasonable to try to make sure that they've had someone attend at least one event. And we're trying to get creative with some different ways to approach that as well. We've been looking at doing some virtual things from the classroom so that maybe some of our families will connect from home. You know, they're still engaging, but maybe they're not present in the building. Having more events that fall like during the day so that maybe that's helpful, like having the event more than once. So once during the day and once in the evening. We've been really trying to think of any way possible to get more family engagement. We already looked at this goal last time, which was around retention of students. And our original goal was that 80% of students remain with us from the prior year. And we went over these percentages last time. We were going to suggest that this be changed to that less than 10% of the families who actually leave our school are leaving because of another program or that they're unhappy with something. And that we were going to track this with a form that we use, like an exit form, to capture why it was that they actually left the school. So I'm going to kind of scroll back to these 3 suggested changes. And does anybody have any comments or questions around those changes? we still have to get approval from OEI to make those changes, but this is the time of year that we have to do that. No one?
I am on board with the first two for sure. I think that's a good move. I'm still trying to understand the impact of the third one there and how, and whether you get appropriate participation in exit questionnaires to be able to meet that.
So Gabe and I were actually talking about this. Our goal would be to have the family actually fill out the exit form. But if the family doesn't, then I think what we would do is have our office manager fill one out for that family to ensure that we're getting 100% participation. Because when a family leaves, typically we've had a verbal conversation with them about why they're leaving. So like I said, ideally, I would like the family to fill it out so that they can give us feedback or comments. But if we're totally unable to do that, then we were thinking we would have the office manager fill it out based on what his interaction was with the person.
And I think that's good. I guess my guess you addressed my underlying point, which is I assume that you've had conversations with them prior to them leaving, so you'd know what the reason is, whether or not they fill out a form or you fill it out. It's good.
Yeah, most of the time, yes. I would say, I don't know, 70% of the families, we probably did have that conversation because we were always trying to get them to stay. I think this would push us to be a lot more intentional, that there were a specific set of questions. And, we may assume that we had a conversation that allowed us to know the truth. And if we can get that family to actually fill out the form, maybe we would capture even more than what we did verbally,
Alicia, can you scroll over just so I can see the original goal on that?
Sure. Yeah, and this one, so this goal that you're looking at now, that would be more of a significant change because it would really totally rework the goal. So I'm open to if there are suggestions or feedback around where where should our focus be? My thinking was this: we know that the majority of the families that left, we had a lot of transiency in our building. So this data point really wasn't that helpful. I was trying to think, how could we make this a useful data point so that we're actually capturing information regarding our program and making sure that we're doing everything to keep our families with us. Obviously, if we see a family that's leaving our school to go to a different program, I would view that as a negative. Obviously, we weren't providing something that they wanted at our school. Now, is it programmatic? Is it that there was, a brand new building down the road that it aesthetically was better? Was it something to do with interactions with staff members? So I would love to capture in those exit surveys, not just that they left to go to a different program, but why. Did they really feel that program was better for their child? Was it an interaction with staff member? Was it something that they provide in their extracurriculars? That data could be very helpful for us as we're building out. Okay, we're noticing that we're potentially losing students because of extracurriculars. Okay, that helps inform some decisions that we make as a school. Anybody else have any feedback or thoughts?
So it sounds like that last metric, we're flipping it to be more of the why did you leave rather than how many stayed. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. So it would mean we want to see that of all of the people who left. So, if you look at this year, we had 176 kids come through the door. And at the end of the year, we had 107 of those students still with us. Lots of transiency. But I would love to have the data around, I want to make sure that less than 10% of those was because they were unhappy. I want to see that the majority of those were because I moved, something that, or maybe I had to because there was no transportation on the west side of Indianapolis, something that was really out of our control as opposed to something that's in our control.
Right. So of that 39%, those, number of students, that 10% of those, that number, the reason why they left was what you had described.
Yeah. So the goal would be less than 10% of anyone leaving our school is something in our control, either because of a negative or because they're leaving to go to a different program. That less than 10% would be that.
Alicia, do you think you were near that 10% now, like this past year? Do you have any, idea of where you would be if this was the goal for this year?
I would predict that we're around that, but we didn't really keep solid information as people were leaving. I mean, I can tell you that most of the families I remember leaving was because of the transiency or transportation. But we didn't keep the information. So I do want to push us next year to make sure that we're tracking exactly why we're losing them. So that at the end of the year, when we come back and do this again, we can say, okay, well, 15% was because of this and 25% it was because of this, and it gives us a lot more information to work from.
And I'm feeling a little bit of apprehension just because of my background in public health and all that, like the transiency. I'm like, well, maybe there is something we can do to help that. Maybe there are, wraparound services that we can provide or something. But I do understand that the goals should probably be changed, but maybe, in that survey, we could dig a little deeper if they are moving or something. Was it because of, a unstable, in the neighborhood, or was it, whatever. Some of those things that are out of our control, maybe if we dug a little deeper, we could find out what we could help with.
Yeah, I really love that. I think that could definitely inform our programming as well. And as we're writing grants to support our families. Yeah, I love that.
One thing that comes to mind, Alicia, is that the other one is a little bit more recruiting focused and student number focused, which does also help us fund the school and make sure that things are moving along like we need them to. So are there any other goals or metrics that you're putting out there to continue to support that I feel like maybe gets lost with the new goal?
So, if we wanted to move back to this, I think that's fine. What I would suggest is that we choose which of these data points is most important. I think in the original goal, it wasn't well defined. It just says of students the prior year. And as we've been looking at this, I was honestly struggling to know, okay, which data point, because if you look at it, we retained 67% of the students who were with us on day one. We retained 63% of the students who were with us on the first count day. We retained 100% that were with us second count day, and 61% that were with us at all throughout the year. So I think if we were to maybe, reset this, maybe we don't go with 80% because we were nowhere near 80%. So maybe we go with something a little more feasible. And then maybe we define which count are we looking at? Are we looking at every kid that walks through the door? Are we looking at a certain count day? But I do think I'm hearing like a unanimous that there is some discomfort from moving totally away from like the retention piece.
I would echo even just Kirsten's call out of that. I think this metric is still relevant. Definitely considering what it could be changed to, and I don't know the options, but the potential of adding a metric that is more aligned with what you're recommending for, the to gain that better insight of why individuals are leaving, to both, keep that retention side, but then even knowing recruitment as well. And then informing the programming would be great.
So maybe this 10% piece could just be more moved into one of my goals. Would everyone feel comfortable with maybe picking one of these and then saying that next year we're working for, I don't know, 70% retention, or maybe even 75?
I'm comfortable with that. I feel like 70 just feels like a reasonable number, but I'm happy to hear what everybody else thinks as well.
Yeah. Is there a particular timeline that you need this decision by?
Yeah, actually, I have a meeting with OEI next week regarding these changes.
Okay.
Hey, Alicia,
Mhm.
I don't know if I have a voice here, but I will will speak up. I was the assistant principal at School 58, which is, I don't know, maybe 3 miles from us there at ILH. And my only year there, we had, by the end of the year, we had 33%, it was an IPS school, we had 33% of our students that ended the year with us started the year with us. And that was not a choice school. We were just a boundary school, and that was people moving in and out of the neighborhood. It's, setting a goal for the kids that walk in day one versus the kids that leave, I personally feel is difficult. I know that it's also important that OEI has data at a certain point. I think where the students that end with the year with us come back with us is more important of a data point. But I do know that OEI needs that data at a certain time of year. So I don't know if we can wait until the beginning of next year to see how many of those students actually returned to us throughout the year. But I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in there.
Well, what if the goal was changed to that 95% of the students we end the year with come back the following year? I mean, I can tell you this has already changed. It's a little tough to base on this year, though, because we knew that we were going to lose some kids with co-locating with Paramount, because we do share certain grade levels and we do share a lot of siblings. So I don't know. That's still a data point that's a little iffy. So we could either focus it on where we end the year and how many come back the following year, or it could be focused maybe on like the first count day. How many do we retain from first count day to end of year? So anybody have a strong feeling on that?
I just have a clarifying question. So for these goals, are they set by OEI, or, like, from what I'm hearing you say, Gabe, is that this is a metric that other schools just don't even usually have a goal for? So I guess I'm just even trying to get a better sense of if there's any direction of what this goal needs to be.
No, I don't think it's necessarily that schools don't focus goals around this. I can guarantee you IPS neighborhood schools probably do not, because they don't recruit. They just have a boundary and that's where kids feed in from.
Okay.
I definitely think charter schools have goals around this,
Okay.
because we actually have to recruit students.
That background's helpful. I was more leaning towards day one, how many students do we have, and then end of year, because the previous year, I can just see some other factors impacting that data. So that's what I'm leaning towards in this moment.
Okay.
Another 2 cents. Most of our academic goals are built on 162-day kids, which is what the state uses to determine growth for iLearn. So students who have been in your building for 162 days, which isn't necessarily the first count day by any means, but it's also not the first day of school. So we basically set a metric that says, or not a metric, but a date. Like this year, it was August 24th. Any student who was with us before August 24th was a 162-day kid. So their data, if we would have taken iLearn, would have been the most impactful data on our school grade and all of that. So, I mean, that's just another thing to consider when thinking about how all of these goals align, so that, you know, there is a little more, I don't know, they're a little more in sync, maybe.
Let's make a decision, Alicia. What do you think? Were you hearing consensus?
Well, the last thing I heard a board member suggest was going with day one, but then I heard Gabe suggest 162 days. I like the 162-day piece because that is linked directly to how our school is evaluated. So
That's what I had in my head. If that's how you're evaluated and that's really what you're trying to get to, then that's what your metrics and goal should be on. And then I like the supplemental, whether it sits with you, Alicia, or in another subset goal or however you do it. I do like the fact that you're going to try to put a goal around why people are leaving and track that data, because I think that's important for you to be able to continually improve.
great.
With that.
Everybody's good with that?
I hear Mr. Whitmore, I think. Paul, did you have something?
Yeah, I just said I was in agreement with that, doing the,
Oh, good.
162 day, and then adding in the why students leave piece to some other area that we can still track.
Well, if I don't hear an objection, I think I hear a consensus, Alicia. So if you'll make those changes, does that then complete your section of the meeting on charter goal updates?
Yes.
Good, good. Let me make a comment to what Gabriel said a while ago about whether he has a voice or not. Gabriel, let me tell you, you have a voice, my friend, okay? You don't have a vote, but you do have a voice, okay? So anytime you feel like you want to chime in on any matter, it matters not to me. I think that your institutional knowledge of what goes on at Key School and how you balance that off of what Alicia has to say is incredibly important to us. So I want you to feel free. This is your key. This is your access key in the future to chime in whenever you'd like, all right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, ready to move on, Alicia?
Yes.
Okay, so the next item is the LED lighting. And while you've got me as the owner on that, I'm just gonna freeform right here and ask Trevor if he wouldn't mind taking that, because I've got other things I have to talk about tonight and I get tired of hearing my own voice. Trevor, can you handle that?
Yeah, and this is just the light situation.
Just exactly, I think we made a decision, just what that decision was, why we made the decision, and the payback on that.
Yeah, so Alicia received a quote from a vendor to replace the lights on the first floor of the building. The second floor has already had the lights replaced. It's going to cost us in the first year about $15,000 to replace the lights. And each year, the payback is about $5,000. So in 3 years, the lights essentially pay for themselves due to the savings from the utilities costs. So we're going to move forward, if everyone is okay with that, with purchasing the lights for the building, which will last a very long time.
Yeah, I think we decided there was no need for a board vote on this, but we did feel like because it was an expenditure of 17,000, and we keep harping on the fact that we've got a tight budget anyway, we just felt it was important that the board understand what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it. And by the way, if somebody has an intense objection to it, I'm happy to hear it, but there was nothing in our discussion that we had with the vendor that said to me this was a bad idea.
And I think Alicia attached the document with that ROI to the meeting invite as well.
Right. Anyone? Okay, it's good. Let's go forward then. Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate that. Alicia, you're going to take the CIPA Aligned Technology Plan?
Yes.
Please? Thank
so
you.
I shared information today that CIPA stands for Children's Internet Protection Act. Because we receive E-rate funding, we do have to be in alignment with their guidelines. And one of those guidelines is that we have to allow space at a board meeting for parents to comment on the technology policy. So we did share that out a few times with our families, but it doesn't look like anyone joined to comment. So we can go ahead and move forward from that.
Thank you, Alicia. Appreciate that. So we're going to move on to the board evaluation. I think, is that something you can share screen on, Alicia? As we talk about that, or?
Sure.
So we sent a questionnaire out to all board members and asked them to score a multitude of areas. And you did that. We appreciate that. We've got the information back. But one of the things that I don't want to say surprised Alicia, but concerned her a little bit, was that some of the grades that and you could see, you either voted complete, in progress, little or no progress, or not applicable. There were a couple of items that Alicia felt like that the board should have scored them higher. And we were trying to understand why. One of the things that I learned a long time ago is that it's awfully hard to have someone meet your expectation if you don't share with them what that expectation is in the first place. I think that just setting this out of context, having you all fill it out without the ability to be able to talk back and forth about it, gave us some scores that were concerning a bit. So with that, Alicia, do you want to just talk for just a couple of minutes about the detail, and we can go from there?
Yeah, and absolutely, no concern. I don't necessarily feel anything was, incorrectly scored. I think what I noticed was there were a few things that I think because we've had new board members come on, they may not have realized that we had in place. So they may have probably just scored us in progress or no progress because they just weren't aware that they were finished. So I think two of the things that stood out to me was it looked like maybe a few people probably haven't seen our succession plan. We did write a succession plan for, if for some reason I was no longer in this position, how would you find a replacement for me? We do have a plan for that. So what I'll do is I'll just make sure to send that out to everyone so that you can see it. I do believe one of the categories was something about our accounting policies as well. So once again, we wrote our accounting policies a long time ago, and they were shared with the board at that time. So many of our newer board members probably just have not seen those. So I will also send those accounting policies out as well. Also, every board member does, or if you don't, please let me know, should have access to our board docs file. So these are all documents that you can go back and look through at any time if you choose to. So as we look at this, I was just thinking it's probably easier if you do have a copy on your computer or in hand, but I thought maybe we could define 2 to 3 categories that we want to look at further when we move more into like strategic planning for maybe when we have a board retreat. I tried to put an X out to the left-hand side if it was a category where it looked like we needed to make more progress. So if you kind of use those X's as a guide and just look back through those areas, it might kind of help us define 2 to 3 areas that we want to really focus on. So maybe to make this go a little bit quicker, I will just kind of scroll through here and read those off. So we have school has a developed long-term strategic plan and revisits and revises it on an annual basis. Given that we're a brand new school, I definitely think this is an area that many of you are very right. We need to look at that. Long-term plans are translated into annual action plans and goals. I think that goes right along with that. Definitely something we need to look at. Another category was that new board members are oriented and fully briefed prior to being seated. So that's something that we might want to look at there. Moving on down, we have board committees have clear scope of responsibility and charges. I definitely agree with you. We had some committees that really moved along well, and others that didn't. So that might be something to look at. Individual board members prepare for meetings and participate constructively. And then another one that kind of goes along with that is that the board has a process for addressing ineffective, destructive, or absentee board members. Moving on down, we have board develops performance goals, targets, and evaluates director performance each year. I think this is definitely happening, but maybe some people put in progress because it had not happened yet. We're actually going to talk about that in a few minutes as well. Board has established a plan for succession in the event. Now, this is what we talked about. I think this is probably just a lack of awareness on this one, so I'll make sure I send that out. The next one was board contracts with independent auditor each year and reviews audit report and takes any needed follow-up action. This is probably also an awareness thing. We're required to do this because we're a new school. We have not had to do this yet, but it will be happening for us in the fall. The board has adopted a long-term financial plan in coordination with the school's overall long-term plans. I would say there might be some discussion to be had around this. We definitely have a 5-year plan financially, but I don't know that we're to the point where it fully aligns with the school needs yet, given that we're so new. Board oversees all fundraising activities on behalf of the school. Really not something we've ever discussed. So those were the areas that look like we saw as the highest need. So we can have some discussion around where we want to focus.
I was just going to say, I think it'd be beneficial for us to have the conversation around the members and attendance, what that threshold is, given it is once a month. There are others participate more, and maybe looking at the positions with so many new members from when we initially held elections. I don't know if we're approaching that 2-year mark, if that's what it is in our agreement, but it would be beneficial to potentially have those again and look at who is heading up those committees. I know a lot's changed in 2 years, especially for, I can imagine others in this group and myself as well, so.
Well, is this a conversation we want to have? We don't want to have this conversation tonight. This will go on forever. Should we talk about this in the context of a retreat? Alicia, is that what you had in mind?
I think what I was thinking is if we could define 2 to 3 areas that we really want to focus on, we could then have those discussions further at the retreat.
Well, I think as you were going through those, there were a couple, 2 or 3 of them that kind of bunched up with other ones. In other words, there's not quite as many as there seems to be. I think
Right.
you can there probably are only 3 or 4 specific areas as you look at these things. And if I were doing it, I'd probably say the ones that would appear to be the most, the ones where there was such a differential between those who said complete and those who said in progress, and just pick 2 or 3 of those and then, consider those for topics in a retreat discussion.
Yep. We
Now,
can
having said that, introducing the concept of a retreat, and again, I don't want to go through it all tonight, but maybe all of you have different ideas of what a board retreat actually is. I've been to a million of them, and what they normally all have in common is they're normally on Saturdays for some reason. They're always away from where you have the normal ones. They're always longer. There always seems to be somebody who facilitates these things, and there's always donuts and coffee. Those are the things that that I've seen in retreats, and I'm not suggesting for a moment they aren't worthwhile, because they are. Because you get into extended conversations about some things you just can't do in a regular board meeting. So I do see the value in them, but I'm not sure when, where, how, and all those kinds of things. So I don't know. Should we? Maybe I should send something out as the board chair to each individual members and talk about the notion of a board retreat and find out what kind of feedback we get in terms of timing, location, date, and all that kind of stuff. I do think, and this is my personal feeling, is I do really think that we ought to do it when we can all be together. I mean, which means post-virus stuff. I just think it's important to see people's body language and to be able to look into their eyes and so on and so forth. So it wouldn't be for a bit yet. So probably, I don't know, August, September, July, something like that. But is that, Alicia, I'm looking to you and anybody else that wants to chime in. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think it would be nice to be in person with each other. I think it'd be hard to do a board retreat on a Zoom call. I definitely think it would be nice to do, because I think we do need to take this survey information and refocus in some areas. So I love the idea of sending something out to all the board members to get information on, when they're going to be available, what they're open for.
Exactly. Anybody else have
Could
any
you send
comments
out
on
a
that? Good.
Could you send out a doodle with some dates and maybe some options, and
Sure.
then we can all kind of vote? My other thought was, if we don't have the time or capacity to vote on topics or goals to work on, could you send a survey for voting on those as well, with maybe the top
Yeah, we could
7 or
include
10
that,
that you
Paul.
mentioned?
Yeah, we can include that in your survey, kind of like what people's feedback is around where they want to focus.
Well, Alicia, why don't you and I get together offline and put together something that makes sense to send out? Then we'll send that out. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Moving on then. We have the potential renter. I think you didn't put an owner for that. That could be either me or you. At least the agenda I saw. Why don't you take it? And I may need to chime in at some point, but why don't you go ahead and kind of tell folks where we are?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you an update. The conversation is still going. Honestly, the conversation almost stopped because they didn't think they were going to be able to afford to be with us. But we really didn't want that conversation to stop. So we went back and we went for a lower rent charge. And we've agreed to, if it works out, that they would pay $3,500 per month. Because they were paying the lower rent amount, it would be a 1-year lease with the option to discuss at the end of 1 year if it could potentially move into 2 years. And that they would leave all of the rooms in the same condition. So, if there were stains on the carpet or anything on the walls, that they would make those repairs.
So I challenged Alicia. I said, what I want to know is, at $3,500, even $3,000 a month, would it cost more? And I'm talking about the variable cost, not the fixed cost. I mean, the cost for certain things, like the mortgage payment, for example, is going to be the same whether we have a tenant or not, right? So if you divide all your expenses between the ones that wouldn't change, irrespective of whether you had a tenant or not, and I just simply asked her, what dollar figure would it take to, at least as a minimum, break even on the costs? There is an intangible in all of this, and that is that there is potential. And Alicia does not think it's going to be a lot of kids, but there is the potential that we may be able to gain some kids for our school from this program. But it's not enough, frankly, to make a decision to take these folks in and lose money. It'd be the frosting on the cake, excuse me, if we could make the equation work. And I think what Alicia figured out was that at $3,000 a month, it would still be better than break even, not by much, right?
Yeah, so just looking at utilities alone, with Paramount there last year, it was about $40,000 in utilities for both schools. This program only runs 3 days a week, and it's a much smaller program. So I think those utilities costs are still going to be far less. So if I had to make an estimation percentage wise, I mean, maybe they cost us $15,000 additional in utilities, but at the end of the year, there's been $42,000 in revenue, and the potential that we could gain students from their programming.
And at those kinds of dollars, we wouldn't want to have a lengthy lease term, because we wouldn't want to preclude other tenants in the future from coming in and paying us more money. So this is one of those back and forths kind of push and shove kind of negotiations where I think for 1 year, I think we'd be foolish not to take them in if it wasn't going to cost us anything, if we had the potential for additional students, and if they're willing, as Alicia said, to leave the place in at least as good, if not better condition than when they arrived.
Yeah, and they, I did talk to them. They were agreeable to those terms, but the decision's not fully made yet. They still need to talk to their board. They're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with the direction from the state for programming next year. So our deadline for kind of having a discussion was the 1st of July, that we would regroup at the 1st of July and they would give a decision on what they were planning to do.
So with that, do we have any strong feelings one way or the other from board members? Just a couple of minutes of discussion on this. If somebody has an objection to kind of the way we're going, I'd like to hear that.
I don't.
Okay, well, Alicia, let's just
All
keep
for it.
going. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say I'm all for it. I mean,
Well, that's important. When your finance guy says he's all for it, that's a good thing.
something is better than nothing.
I agree. I agree.
Well, and if you think back to our budget, it was like right around a $70,000 deficit that we were looking at. And so that would really significantly change that to less.
Great. So, Alicia, can we then go into the committee items? Are we ready to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first one, Trevor, is you on Finance Committee. Do you have a report that you'd like to give at this time?
No, I do not.
All right, fair enough. I do have one on governance, and this will take a couple of minutes, but I think it's important. So Alicia got an email or a call last evening from Tyler. And you know, he looked at his next month. By the way, we have the chief executive evaluation due by the end of June. And so Tyler did a look at his schedule over the next month and came to the conclusion, as kind of an epiphany, if you will, came to the conclusion that he was not going to be able to complete his work as the lead person on Alicia's evaluation. Obviously, we wish that hadn't been the case, but this is not conscriptive service. I mean, you're here, you all are here voluntarily. You all have lives out there that you have to balance. And part of that life includes the commitment you make to ILH. And so rather than trying to convince him to change his mind, we simply accepted the fact that he's not going to be able to do it. And after looking at what he's gotten done so far, I'll be honest with you, there wasn't much left. He's really done a hell of a job. So what I was going to do tonight was I was going to ask for a volunteer to lead the charge on the evaluation. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to call Paul Whitmore and I'm going to ask him if he'd be willing to do it, just so he wouldn't have to spend time tonight talking about who's going to do it and give people 3 or 4 days to make up their mind and so on and so forth. And Mr. Whitmore graciously agreed to take the lead on this. Doesn't mean I like Paul more. It just simply means that he's expressed an interest recently about wanting to take on some additional responsibilities. And so I was already on that committee. I'm going to stay on that committee. I promised Paul that I'll walk alongside him as we finish up the items that need to be done. One of the biggest things that's still out there are 15-minute conversations with about 5 or 6 of the school teachers, the leadership team. And I, as you probably all know, that I have a gift of gab, and I'd love to talk to all of them, and I'm happy to do that part. what Paul and I are going to have to do then is once we get that done, that really is the last significant piece that's not been done, is to assimilate all of the information into a report and make that available to the mayor's office and whoever else wants to look at it. So, I had a conversation with Tyler today, and I said, does this mean you're not going to be able to stay with us as a board member? He said, no, this is a one-off kind of thing. In fact, he said, come August, when I have all this bar exam stuff behind me, I'll be freed up to do a lot more. So I'm really happy about that. I really like Tyler's, I like all of y'all's leadership. I like Tyler's leadership, and I don't want to lose him as a board member, and we're not going to. We just need to help him out of a jam. He's not going to be able to complete this effort. We can complete it for him and get it done. So that's where we are tonight with that. I need to send Paul the information that Tyler has sent me so far, and we'll go on down the road towards completion. Just wanted to put that out there for everyone, and happy to listen to any comments, concerns, questions, or what have you. And a special thanks to Paul for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for stepping up.
Yes, thank you.
Happy to do it.
All right, good. Alicia, academic excellence?
We don't have anything further to share.
I don't have anything more for facilities. Development, Zachary?
Nothing to report here.
Okay, all right, well, that then at 6:52 concludes the business for tonight, unless anyone has anything for the good of the order. Awfully quiet, okay, good.
Oh, actually, sorry.
All right.
Always got to throw something in, right? No, our next board meeting is that first week of July, which tends to sometimes be a problematic week for meeting as a board. So I wanted to throw that out there and see if we were going to still hold a meeting. The only thing that at that point, we're supposed to know something about COVID-19 situation. So if we want to leave it on just as anyone who can come, and maybe that's our only agenda item. I don't know what you think.
Leave it on as a placeholder. So we'll have a meeting scheduled. But if we have an opportunity to not have that meeting because we don't have enough business, frankly, to tie up all of these fine people for a board meeting, let's just cancel, okay? But let's leave it on the books as a placeholder. Perhaps move it to the second week of July. What do you think about that?
The second Thursday in July, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, just because of vacations, and I like to think people are going to be able to take vacations. I have no idea if they will or not, but let's make it to this. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, that actually might be better because I don't know at what point we're getting direction from Department of Ed. We should definitely have direction by that point. If I get direction earlier, you'll probably see it on the news, but I will still share it out through email with the board.
Well, let's do second Thursday with the caveat that if we have the opportunity to cancel that altogether and give you all a break, that's exactly what we'll do. And then we'll use that. We'll use that as a credit against the opportunity of having a retreat later on in the summer. So you can, we don't want to have you in here 12 times a month and then the extra time for the retreat. This would be a way to kind of make up for that a little bit. So unless anybody else has anything else, I want to thank each and every one of you for your time tonight. We're getting you out of here about 6 minutes early, which is a good thing. Everyone have a wonderful rest of